All right, the time is 5 o'clock. I would like to call the meeting of the Board of Adjustment Appeals for December 18th, 2017 to order. First motion of business is the approval of the minutes from our last City Council meeting. I'll give everybody a couple minutes to review the minutes from our last Board of Adjustment meeting. I'll give everybody a couple minutes to review the minutes and then look for a motion. I have a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
The only thing I do have for the record, I did recuse myself of one of these items.
I think it's on there.
It's right there.
Oh, okay, I missed it. I'm sorry.
It said you returned his.
All right, I'll second.
All right, I have a motion and a second on the floor for the minutes. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I abstain.
Those opposed? Let the record show that Ms. Kathy Slegel abstained, and we had 4 aye votes. All right. First case number BOA 17-18. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. All right. Wayne?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a special exception request for a property located at 552 North Section Street. The applicant is Kenneth Lee, and the business is commonly known as Ben's Barbecue. In the zoning ordinance, the property is zoned B1. In the zoning ordinance, a restaurant is not allowed by right in B1. So the restaurant is technically non-conforming. What their request is tonight is to get a special exception from the Board of Adjustments. In the B1 zoning district and the uses, a restaurant is allowed by a special exception with the board's approval. And so tonight they're asking for that approval. Again, to recognize it as a restaurant, that would remove the non-conforming use aspect of the property. Staff has looked at this. It's been in existence. I think they've had a business license since 1986, I think, according to the information we received from City Hall. We reviewed this case, this use. Didn't see anything that stuck out at us that was an issue. It's been in existence for quite a while. Even before it was Ben's Barbecue, I believe, was a restaurant before that historically. So the property has historically been used commercially as a restaurant. We went through all the criteria that's established for the special exceptions and did not find anything that would change our opinion. And so therefore we recommend that the board grant them their special exception for the restaurant. And this if it's granted, it runs the land, so it doesn't matter what kind of restaurant it can still be used as a restaurant. It's not for a particular restaurant; it's for the restaurant use in general, and that will go on in perpetuity for that. Yeah, happy to answer any questions you might have.
Mr. Chairman, I have one question. Just for curiosity, Wayne, was the zoning before the restaurant or the restaurant before the zoning? Or can you answer?
I can't answer that, Mr. Amen. It's my understanding that the B1 has been, that designation was given that property for many years. We didn't go back and look historically when it was first designated that.
Right.
By looking at it, my hunch is it's been that way for many years, probably predated the restaurant that's there now. As a period of time, when you start assigning new zoning, if there's a use there, you try to recognize that use. And so my guess would be, I can't verify that, but my guess is it's probably been zoned B1 for a number of years.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Wayne. Would the applicant like to make a presentation or say anything?
We've been there forever. It's been a restaurant when I was going to high school here in the 70s.
Can you state your name?
Oh, my name is
and residence for the.
I own Ben's in Fairhope. I live in Bell Forest, and like I said, we've been in business for over 30 years at that one spot. And as far as I can remember back, it's been a restaurant. So, I mean, Board Morrow had a restaurant there, and a number of people, Pioneer Smokehouse, and Better Burger, and.
Okay. Thank you.
Make good barbecue.
Thank you.
I'd like to open the public hearing. Is there anybody that would like to speak on this matter? Not seeing any. I will then close the public hearing on that. Are there any questions from the board or any comments from the board, of staff, or of the applicant?
Does this have, like, could it be a bar? You know, if you say that, if you do this?
No, the use of the restaurant now, you know, if you're asking, can it be a bar independently from a restaurant? The answer is no to that. You can't have that. Can you have a restaurant with a bar in it? That's probably something we would probably allow. Now, again, a restaurant, when you have a restaurant and a bar is sort of an ancillary use to the restaurant. So you know, they could probably serve drinks. And again, that's something we haven't crossed yet because currently it's just a barbecue restaurant. But it cannot be a standalone bar, you know, without serving food, those kind of things. And typically, you look at the percentage of sales. If they start selling more bar-related items than they do food, then it becomes a bar. And so it's some tricky thing. But in my opinion, they could, if it were sold to someone else, and they want to establish a restaurant and then sell beer or wine or what have you, that would likely be allowed as an ancillary use to the restaurant only.
Any other questions, comments? All right. With none, I would then entertain a motion.
I so move approval of the plan.
We have a motion on the floor to approve the special exception for Ben's Barbecue. Do I have a second?
I second. Go.
Seconded by Mr. Schneider. All right. We have a motion and a second to approve the special exception for Ben's Barbecue.
Roll call.
A restaurant.
For a restaurant.
A restaurant for Ben's Barbecue. You're correct.
Roll call. Mr. Schneider.
Yes, approved.
Ms. Stankowski.
Aye.
Mr. Avent.
Aye.
Mr. Strong.
Aye.
Ms. Slagle.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right. Thank you all very much. You have your special exception. All right. One down. All right. Wayne, case number. Let's move on to case number 17.19.233. Oh, I'm sorry, Miss Boyette. Let's move on to case 17.19.233 Divot Loop.
Yes, this request is for a side setback variance. The house is currently under construction at 233 Divot Loop. The building permit was issued based on the setbacks on the west side of the property, 10 feet from the property line. The house, once it was actually staked out on the lot and under construction, is only 7.1 feet from the property line. The applicant is requesting a variance to that 10 foot, which would result in a 2 foot 9 foot variance. Any questions? Staff recommendation is to deny the request based on the request does not meet the criteria of a hardship as established by the zoning ordinance.
What
All
is
right.
the purpose for the setback increase or decrease?
The house is constructed over the setback by 2.
Now, is this going to
2.9
require a total redoing of the building?
No, that's not required. They can cut off that portion of the building of the house to comply with the required setbacks.
Okay.
Would the setback affect other people? Has there been any letters on this or anything?
I have not received, staff has not received any letters from adjacent property owners.
Thank you, Emily.
Thanks.
At this time, I'd like to request that the applicant make a presentation.
Hello, everyone. My name is Brett Orrell. I'm with Poly Surveying. I'm representing this for the applicant, the owners, the goods. This property, myself and Mike Hayes is the builder. When we originally looked at this lot, we looked at it three or four different times, just trying to get it to fit, because the subdivision plat states that one side has to meet a 10-foot setback requirement, while the other side could be a zero lot line scenario. Staff is correct that it was submitted with the 10-foot setback intended to be on the west or south line, and that's where the closest corner of the house lies in relation at this time. The way I presented it, we had about 3 days to prepare the variance application. We submitted it. I looked at that as a vague interpretation of where the setback could lie. So the way I presented it was that the 10-foot setback could be on the northern side, in which the house was much further away, and really only resulted in a 3 square foot of the house and 15 inches. It truly is what it impacts the setback. So 3 square feet. So that's the way that I presented it to you, and that's what the sketch represents. Upon discovery of this, we went out and did some additional field work to verify where the existing structure is in relation to the other dwellings, and we've noted that and tried to dimension and illustrate that to my best of my ability. The red line on that map represents where it was proposed to be, and the blue line representing its physical location as it sits today. This lot isn't a regular shaped lot. I would argue that it is that. You can see on there that there's also a 20-foot front setback available to us. We are 42 feet back at our closest point to the right-of-way. We sit much further back than the adjacent homes. It really fits nicely in this area. We didn't maximize the build here. We could have built 5 foot wider up to the property line, but we haven't done that. And one of the things that led to this, and I've given you kind of a handout, and I didn't want to bore you with a lot of back and forth. Upon discovery of this, we did some back and forth with our manufacturer of our equipment. This company is a large manufacturer. They have identified that there is a software potential issue. They have not updated and corrected at this time. I actually have a conference call with my sales guy and TopCon tomorrow to try to work through all those technical issues. This was not done with an intent other than we did everything we can to prevent anything like this from happening, and it was not the homeowner, the builder, no one intended this to be placed where it is, but at this point in time, that's where the house sits. Both homes, it is developed on both sides, so there's not an encumbrance on someone in the future of developing. And the spacing between the nearest home is right at 11 feet. We verified that in the field. Once getting that information, I contacted Vince Lacoste with Bethel Engineering, he's a former partner of mine, and a structural engineer. We had a conference call with Tim Spafford with ADI. He is an architect. And we talked through the fire code issues. In that conference call, basically it was told to me from Tim directly that if we exceeded 10 feet in spacing between the structures, then we exceed the residential fire code. And I just printed out a separate handout there that illustrates that in terms of where the walls are located. That's your third handout there available to you. Try to illustrate what happened, where the house was placed, and we were asking, for a variance of the setback, seeing is we really fit more centered on the lot. We really don't affect the neighboring properties. We are further back, and because of the technical issues that happened with this equipment, I've suspended all use immediately upon discovery. I've audited over 300 jobs that have been worked through with this equipment, narrowed that down to 60 and 12 that I went out and inspected that had been done within a 60-day period. I found one potential issue of those 12. So I've done everything in my power to ensure that this does not happen. I've suspended all use of this equipment, and I'm working with this manufacturer. I mean, I've got equipment sitting on the shelf right now I cannot use, and people that aren't working because of that. And I'm just asking for some relief from my behalf and the owners that there was no intent here to place the house where it would be any type of setback violation.
All right. Brett, do you have anybody else that wants to speak, or are you?
I believe so. I believe Mr. Hayes would like to speak.
Okay. If you don't mind, just state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, said address as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm Michael Hayes with MDH Construction. I live at, my office is 8954 South Lamb Lane in Daphne, Alabama. I've been a state licensed contractor since 2003, and I apologize to have to meet you under these circumstances. You guys can check with the city of Fairhope, the city of Daphne, the city of Mobile. I've never had any kind of infraction like this ever. And it is a misfortune that I have to present this for you today. We're just trying to represent the goods. And I just want to make sure you understand nothing malicious was done. We weren't trying to get away with anything. We didn't build a house too big for the lot. Brett and myself spent several conversations trying to center the house up, make it look good, to move it back. There was no malicious part on it. We had multiple inspections, and it was brought to my attention after one of them that by Miss Emily that we had an infraction on the setback, and we immediately tried to do what we could to come up with a plan to rectify it. Unfortunately, we're 75% framed, and so we're kind of stuck with begging you to help us out. It's hard to move a house once it's in. But we didn't mean anything malicious, and you can search my reputation. I've never had any kind of infraction like this or any problem like this. Brett and myself, his company's had a relationship for over 12 years, done multiple projects together, and never had anything like this. So we appreciate it if you could give us any leniency this evening.
Thank you.
From the city's point of view, what is the what kind of a violation? What would this, granting this variance? What will it do other than we got a building that's 2.5 or 1.5 feet off of where it should be?
Right, and we certainly sympathize with the plight of the surveyor and the home builder. From our perspective, from staff, we have to go by the criteria that's given to us to make decisions on. That's what we look at when we write recommendations. And what you have basically the integrity of the variance process. I mean, although I understand what happened, what if the next person comes and does that? The next person, you start diminishing the value and the strength of the process. We have a lot of people who comply without any problem. And I totally understand with what happened to them, and it's totally I know how those things happen sometimes. But I think what we're trying to do is uphold the integrity of the zoning ordinance and the variance process and those criteria that we apply routinely to other applicants.
That seems like a rule that really, everybody breaks rules, and they didn't mean to break it. It seems like we're being a little too firm on this one.
Well,
if there was something that this variance was going to cause as a problem or a further violation, blah blah blah, then I could say, we need to deny it. But this is already into the framing stage, and
it is, and I'll submit to you how's that. That does not lend any weight in my mind as far as what stage it's in, what kind of construction it's in. Again, when we look at it when we develop our recommendations, we look at it strictly from is there a hardship, and it cannot be self-created hardship as well. And I think something like this would be a self-created hardship. And again, I know it sounds very firm and very draconian to think that way, but again, I think we look at it from a standpoint of treating everybody who walks in and applies for a variance. We're going to treat them the same way and apply the same criteria to them. I know it may sound draconian and a little bit, heavy-handed, but and again, we totally respect the authority of the Board of Adjustments. We understand their plight, and we're here presenting our best recommendation, our best judgment on these cases. But again, we certainly recognize the board's authority to grant waivers, and we would never want to interfere with that, and we understand the plight that the applicant has as well.
So, just going back to the process here, folks, I would like to open the public hearing. Is there anybody that would wish to speak on this matter? No. Okay, good. Then I will then close the public hearing. Okay, so now it's time for board questions and comments.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to ask the builder or the surveyor, have you thought about what if it's denied? What would be the process? What is your thought on what you would do next to remedy the situation?
I mean, I'll address that. Brett Rail with Poly Surveying again. We have had that discussion. We sat down upon discovery, went out, did the field work. I met with Mike and Ms. Good the following day. We looked at all options. Our first option was to submit to you as a board and look at all angles. And at that time, we did not know that it was a issue with my equipment, that this was discovered, and we started investigating. I mean, for 4 weeks, I've been just all hands on deck trying to figure this thing out. And at that point in time, we've discussed options, but the options aren't great.
Uh-huh.
The option, for instance, on the side in which it was submitted for permit, the front corner of this, where the house is 7 feet one, that is a bedroom. So modifying it in any way is going to be a major issue. On the other side, it's 3 square feet, and that's we thought it was best that we present it, because the plat itself clearly is very vague. It states 10 foot either side. There's not a directive as to which side. I don't see that on new plats. This was done back in 2008. And so we presented it on that side so that if indeed there was any type of modification and we could not get approval from the 5 sitting here, that would be our best option in terms of modifying anything. But we would prefer not to have to modify and actually move forward with construction. It's completely framed. Slab's been in. Slab sat for 30 days, and framing. He got his framers lined up, and that's when we had the sheathing inspection. Inspection is when it was discovered, and we've been on it ever since, trying to remedy the best way we can.
So have you come up with an idea in case it is denied?
I mean, we've had discussions with our structural engineer, who I mentioned before. It really depends on which side you look at. If it's on the west side, it's going to be very difficult. I let Mike speak to that. I mean, it's going to be very difficult to modify a bedroom.
It would pretty much mean that 3 feet of the bedroom by 10 foot would be gone, and the bedroom would be useless for a bedroom, because the bedroom was small as it was.
On the north side? Or down here?
The south side.
Down here.
South
Yeah.
side.
It'd be on the right side of the house if you were facing it from the street.
That would be the south side.
That would be that's the bedroom.
The south side.
If on the opposite side, where we're 8 foot, I think 8'7", it's a closet, so we can easily modify that to come into the 10-foot setback.
So for clarification purposes, I apologize to the board. Let me just ask this. The violation is occurring on the north or the south side?
South, right here.
South.
But it's over this setback line.
It's over both setback lines.
It's over both setback lines.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the applicant is proposing that the.
That's not correct.
Yeah, that's why I'm trying to clarify this just for the record so everybody understands where the violation. Because on this plan, just on this plan that we're seeing, you're showing that over a setback line.
That is correct. That is correct. So the way, when the plat states 10 foot setback either side, or 10 not either side, 10 foot setback on one side. That's what it states. So when the violation came up, I looked at the configuration of the home and said, okay, on this side is a less impact, right? So it's 15
On the north
inches.
side.
So we showed all those. We moved that setback to that side. You can clearly see we've got the adequate spacing there. So on the other side, either way you interpret it, if you move the 10-foot setback with one side or the other side is in compliance. It's not over. So we felt it was best to present it in this way as if the 10-foot setback is on the north side, because there's not a clear defined location, not in the covenant restrictions nor on the plat.
Okay, so we're actually,
Okay, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Based on the existing houses that are built, there can only be one side that the 10-foot setback can be on.
Right.
You can't have two zero lot lines
lot
abutting
lines.
each other.
There's a
So
zero.
the 10-foot setback has to be on the south side where they're currently at 7.1 feet.
Is that denoted on the plat?
No, but we don't allow
2 zero
It-
lot lines.
to abut one another.
Mr. Chairman, can I say something?
yes, sir, please, as the expert on the board of this.
Yeah, I'm not an expert, but what Wayne was saying about the process of setbacks, and he does, and same with Buford, I thoroughly respect what they're saying about setbacks, and all they can do is recommend what's black and white, and that's their job, and I respect that. But then again, the reason people come to the Board of Adjustments is when the rules doesn't apply anymore, and then we got to wait it all out and see how it all falls out. I read the plat and looked at it, kind of studied this, and kind of bothered by it this morning. I'm sorry. And I respect what Emily's saying about, it's 0 and 10, but the houses, once you start one house, and that one house is against the property line, the next one ought to be 10 feet. And I agree, it should be. I thoroughly respect that too. But the situation is the plat, the written instrument, was not clear at all. I mean, I guess myself done 1,000 subdivision plats. I seen where we made mistakes about trying to note setbacks rather than showing setbacks on plats, which, words kind of get things mixed up a little bit, whereas pictures, you don't. And the situation is that I'm looking at this thing for the greater good, this is my personal feelings only. There's a couple of issues about this particular, it's almost like a perfect storm on this one. One, you go out, your instrument's not calibrated right, which I've seen that happen. And you had all the intent of staking this thing out properly, but unfortunately, you only went by the instrument that told you this, how to stake it out. And, in this world we live in today is different than what way I used to survey. But, the case of it is that if this thing, for example, on the north side, the closest we are to the north side to another building is 27 feet. And then the other side is 11 feet. And the property lines are defining all this, but that's this, you don't see those, and the situation is if we're in a situation that we're against any kind of code, and the fire code being the biggest one, I really would have a hang up with it. If this thing was 9.9 feet, I would say it's no way, but we're 11 feet and the code says 10. Weighing this thing out, I really don't.
It says 10 to the lot line.
Yeah, it's 10 to the lot line, but
Yeah.
what I'm saying is that the building code is 10 feet from the structure, from structure to structure, whereas this is 11 feet.
Mr. Chairman, if I may address Mr. Avent, you, by allowing them to, by granting that variance on the southwest, whatever side we want to call it,
Right.
You would then be creating a hardship for the neighbor in the fact that they could never make any improvements to their house. They have a 0 lot line on that side, and if they chose to take it all the way to the lot line, then you're
Well,
restricting them.
that's true, Emily, but they can improve it 1.1 feet or
They
1
can-
foot. And if that's so, then they still, if they built something triangular, which in reality they're not, they still going to be 10 feet away from any, well, they would be if they built right on the property line.
Which they are by right allowed to build all the way up to that property line, which would then put them at 7.1 feet.
Wouldn't that be kind of a relatively unusual situation for a person to go and build that little triangle in there? I mean, they have the right to do it, but does that mean that anybody with an ounce of brains would they do it?
Well-
Now, let's not get carried away here.
What she's saying, then again, Emily, I agree with you. You know, you are taking some right away from them. The likelihood is slim and none. If you want to get logical about it, sometimes I've been guilty of being too logical about stuff.
You could make them fire rate it. This.
Say that again?
Yeah, they could.
If they would agree to fire rate it, then they could all, then that wouldn't hinder their.
Yeah, if you can fire rate the wall of the existing house,
That wouldn't hinder. If he fire rated this.
I don't know what the fire rating would be. Maybe.
But then
you answer that?
he can expand.
As long as we don't have any windows, we have one small window over a bathtub that's just a little 1 foot tall. I mean, if that's what it took, we'd take it.
But
and
what
the
is
houses
the
get a lot
code
further
for the
away.
fire? I'm totally, I don't understand the
Yeah,
code.
the fire code would be no openings, but that would be if the houses were parallel. In this case, we're moving away from that. So in that bedroom alone, we even if they built to that property line, we start to move further and further away from there, and we
Right.
have one little small decorative build,
But then again, if we took the window out and we had a true, what is a 2-hour firewall after that point?
But it would be fire rated at the if they expanded on that lot at its full extent at that angle in which you are proposing, we're talking about a window well further back to the rear of the house, in which it would exceed that 10 foot no matter what. So there's no window in that bedroom that would be affected. So the brick on that side is a firewall. That's what the definition would be. So.
But is it the whole side? We're really getting
I
into
know.
the details, but does the code say the window has to be 10 feet away from a structure, or is it the whole side of the structure? You know,
That's getting a little out of it.
yeah, and same with mine, but the way I look at it, if you're going to say that whole side of the wall, in my opinion, would have to be, you know, a 2-hour or whatever fire rated wall in event, like Emily's saying, that someone built up to the property line.
Well, I will say I sort of agree with Dick that the logic of them building that in that triangular pie shape is slim to none.
I think you're right on the money.
And I,
Has there been any word from that neighbor at all?
Yeah.
Have y'all spoken to them?
The only
Yeah.
Would it be okay for them to?
Sure.
own the street?
Richard Good, I'm the owner of the property. We live in Mobile, okay? I've talked with the neighbor, Anna and Tom, and they liked the way it looked faced up. That's all I can tell you on that. I've had no objection, from them. And that's all I can tell you on that. I hope you approve it. If you want to talk about hardships, it's a hardship.
Oh, I agree.
So there's my hardship case. It has to do that. But no, we really like to move into this home as it is designed. To make any adjustments really throws it, who knows what's going to happen, to be very honest with you. Because it destroys one bedroom.
What,
That's all. Look.
Mr. Chairman, let me ask you this. Assuming that, and I keep on going back, no, it's slim and none, but Emily's right, we are taking a right from somebody. What if they had an affidavit from the adjacent property owner saying they have no issues and not planning on building on that side? Some kind of documentation, would that be proper to?
Mr. Chairman, I wouldn't want to give legal advice because I'm certainly not legal counsel. But the board certainly has the authority to make conditions of approval.
Okay, that's what I was really asking you for. Thank you.
If we agreed to make that side firewall, a 2-hour firewall, would that be sufficient? And if they added on, then it would be a 2-hour firewall? I mean, we only have to take the ransom window out, and then it's a firewall.
Yeah, I'm just gonna try to move this along, and we'll get this to a vote. But from my perspective, just so everybody understands my perspective on this, while I agree with the city's view on this, and I respect their opinion. Look, we're talking about a foot, a couple feet in a little triangular piece, like I said, 3 square feet. If they're willing to fire rate the wall, and it is what it is, and to tear the whole building down or make a house unusable, I'm not personally willing to go there. So that's my opinion, just for the record, for y'all, so y'all understand.
It seems very reasonable to approve this variance.
And
me. I have no idea why we've spent this much time on such a what I consider to be a rather insignificant mistake.
I also want, I agree, Dick, but I also do want to make clear that maybe no future expansion can be done. That variance is for the footprint of the building only. Because it does go with the house, it does go with the land far past when you're going to be here, and if that variance is in, then 30 years from now, if they could expand that house. So, in my opinion, I think it's going to be a condition of the approval that no future expansion to that, I guess, the southwest be allowed on lot 108. In addition to the firewall, that is my opinion. Are there any other questions or comments from the board at this time? Are there any other questions or comments from the
All the applicant and the professionals that with the applicant? I appreciate their hard work on outlining this for us, made it easier.
Are there any questions from y'all? All right, with that, I will entertain a motion.
I move we approve the variance.
Do you have any conditions you would wish to attach to that, Mr. Schneider?
I don't see any need to. I mean, it's relatively insignificant, and the possibilities of anything going on like that is almost beyond reasonable thinking. I mean, they've made a mistake, and they've gone so far with this that to turn it around now is so silly. I don't understand it. And as far as getting a variance on it, who would think about building something like a foot by 9.1 foot triangle to do what with it? The
Are there-
person, you know, is already got a house.
Mr. Schneider, are there any conditions you'd like to attach, maybe by a firewall,
Oh, yeah.
or
Yeah.
the no expansion to the southwest, or any of those conditions you'd like to attach to the motion?
Make it a firewall, yeah, that'd be a good idea. Yeah, that's reasonable.
Okay.
I'll second this motion.
All right. We have a motion and a second on the floor to approve the variance as requested,
I'll call roll.
as long as the firewall is added to the southwest. I would like everybody to make their vote by saying aye or nay, please. Emily, will you call the roll?
Mr. Schneider?
Aye.
Ms. Stankowski? Aye. Mr. Avent?
Aye.
Mr. Strunk?
Aye.
Ms. Slagle?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Your variance is approved.
Thank you.
All right. Thank y'all. Moving on.
Mr. Chairman, it's good to be before you again.
Yes, sir.
From a protracted absence due to graduate school. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, 319 Equity Street, we have before you a rear setback line variance request. And I think probably the best drawing from which we can understand the request, if you'll turn to page 5 in your packet. We have an enlarged raster image, as we call in GIS, an enlarged aerial view of the site. So you notice the subject property, and then you notice some adjoining properties. And the request before us at this time is a rear setback line adjustment. And the setback line in question in the request before you is the setback line, the 35-foot setback line that falls along the 57-foot long rear property line. You look in the lower right-hand corner of the image. That is opposite of a 118.3 property line. There's a bit of a peculiarity on this lot because it is a generally rectangular but oddly shaped lot. And so as a result, you have two lot lines, a 118.3 and a 20-foot lot line that are concurrent with or adjoining with the right-of-way. The 20-foot setback line and its opposite, 152.5, that's clearly meets the definition of a front lot line and a rear lot line. So you have your 35-foot front and rear setbacks. The 118.3, only a portion of it, I think it's about 69 feet, is adjoining to the right-of-way. So the request is to treat the 35-foot rear setback line that falls along the 57-foot long lot line, treat that as a 10-foot setback line, basically to allow some additional room for constructing a home. The justification for approval, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, the justification is that this is a peculiarity unique to the site. And because of the odd shape of the site and having those two lot lines along the right-of-way. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to answer any questions before we turn it over to the applicant.
I hate these lots.
Thank you, Mr. Avon. All right.
I've been through this before.
All right. Let's hold questions for staff until after the applicant makes a presentation. I think she has some clarifications. Ma'am.
My name is Knox McMurphy. I'm with Ashurst Niemeyer. I work for the seller of this particular lot. It is under contract to be purchased, and I guess for lack of a better way of, let me just start off with when my seller bought the house or the lot, it was one lot and it was subdivided into two, and so my buyer was, okay, they weren't going to build for a while. Then they decided not to build, they needed to sell it. And so I went and had another survey, and I've got a copy of this that I'd like to give all of y'all. Do y'all already have this already?
Yeah, we had that.
The one that's on record?
Yes. Yes, ma'am. We have
Okay.
that.
Right. And then So then there were, as you can see on the original that's recorded, there's three 35-foot setbacks. And I really was liking some clarification as to where the actual back 35 setback would be located. I had spoken to Mr. Buford, and I went and had the survey originally drawn with the 35 setback line back here and the 10 here, and he said he could not approve it. So what I did do, if that's all right, I went and had pictures made. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, that's fine.
And they're labeled. Because I wanted y'all to understand the way the setback, I wanted it conforming to what is already there. So what I'm really asking for is for the setbacks to be consistent with what's there already. Like on the house on the right side facing the southern house, the house faces directly to the road. So there's two 10-foot setbacks. There's a 10-foot setback on that side. And am I talking in circles?
You're doing
you're-
fine.
you're-
You
you're
keep
doing
going.
great.
You're
Please
doing.
and then, so that would be the 10-foot setback on lot 3. I guess the address is 319. And then the house on the northern side, which is lot 2, that has already been built, they've got a 10-foot setback on the right next to this lot. And they have a 35-foot setback going across the back. And then if you go to the lots in the properties off of Liberty Heights subdivision that back up to that, all of those have 35-foot setbacks along that way. And then the other thing, if the purchasers of this lot, they want to build a 1-story house. They do not want to build a 2-story house. And the way the survey that we all have in your packet, they can't build their 1-story house. There's not enough room. And even the Hilliers, who are next door, I've gone and spoken to them, and they would be very unhappy if a 2-story house went in overlooking their property. And the other side is, the other issue would be that the house to be built perpendicular and not line up. There's not enough room with that survey to go up and in. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'll follow you.
Yes, ma'am. We
But
understand.
this, can I?
Yeah, yes, yes, sir. Go ahead.
This is the recorded plat.
That's the recorded plat, yes, sir.
And a surveyor,
I had,
but he's not saying that's a 10-foot, he's illustrating.
he's
a 10.
illustrating. We haven't had anything approved.
Mr. Chairman, that's a supporting document. That's a supporting document to the application.
Right. Okay. So you want on the, I guess, the eastern side, you're requesting a 10-foot setback in lieu of the 35-foot setback.
That's what she wants.
Instead of the 35 being right here, because there's a house here and there's a house here. We were requesting the 10-foot setback here.
Right. And this right here, is that a public,
That's right. Well, it's
Is
a
that a
private
public-
driveway.
it's private?
Yes, sir.
So that's just a flag-shaped lot?
Right. Now, these people have access to that. The Hilliers, they have access to that driveway. But this lot would have to come in 20 feet here.
Does these people have a legal right to that?
So they have to exit through this.
The driveway has to come in that way.
Yeah. So, okay. So, Ms. McMurphy, do you have anything else you want to say right at this moment? We'll let you come back up.
I don't want to confuse you with all
Sure.
of this.
So, let me just make sure that the board understands, because they haven't all seen this yet.
Yeah.
But from what you're showing us is you're actually requesting something other than we're looking at. Is that right?
Well, what you have, this is what is recorded
Yes, ma'am.
with the city. I had Woodlands do another survey about a month and a half ago. I mean, it's not recorded, but
Right.
that's what I'm asking for. That one, the one that you have in your packet,
Is not what you want.
Well, it's not what yeah, not what I want.
Not what you want. No. What she?
So this is not,
Yeah, she is not asking for this.
This I never would agree
This
with.
one.
It should have been 10.
Correct.
To 10 feet.
And this
They
is the
did that
35.
because of this. I don't know who's, I'm running into this situation all the time.
But that doesn't.
But-
That.
Okay.
So instead of
Buford.
So, Mr. Chairman, to try to reconcile what you
Yes, sir.
just heard, what the applicant is verbalizing into the record is, if we go back to that aerial photograph on page 5 of your packet. So the effect of what we just heard would be the following. The 35-foot setback line that corresponds to the 57-foot long lot line would remain in place.
Uh-huh.
And the new request is for a 10-foot setback line in lieu of a 35-foot setback line corresponding to the 152.5-foot long lot line. Two problems with that, Mr. Chairman. One is that is not the request before you that has been duly noted and advertised into the public meeting. Problem one. Problem two is that is the lot line that clearly represents the definition of a front lot line and a rear lot line, because the 20-foot lot line is the narrowest dimension contiguous with the right-of-way. If you draw a perpendicular line from that 20-foot lot line at any point along its length, it will intersect with the 152.5-foot long lot line anywhere along there. So we have there a very clear definition of a front lot line, a rear lot line, therefore a front setback line and a rear setback line. I, as a staff member, could not recommend a variance to that setback line. So I will certainly defer to the board, but use that please take that information into account when you make your decision.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So let's get back on task here. Ms. McMurphy, are you finished speaking at this moment? You can come back up if there's questions and stuff.
I just know there's so many surveys going around, and that's not what I want. This is what
That's what you want. Okay, perfect. Thank you, ma'am.
That's what I mean.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, we will close the applicant presentation. We will open the public hearing. Is there anybody that would like to speak on this matter? With nobody speaking, I will then close the public hearing. All right. Board questions and or comments. Is there anybody that would like to ask any questions of staff or the applicant?
I have one. I agree with your definition of front and rear on this Buford. But then again, it's just like it's case by case. And because of the irregular size of it, I'm taking the first part out where this is not part of the application. I go back to it. But geometrically, what they're proposing here, to me, lines up with the adjacent houses better than if it was turned, and then again, the orientation, I walk by this thing 3 times a week. I'm very familiar with it, but the orientation of it with the rear setback being really the side by the definition, yeah, would, but because it's irregular and because of the shape and everything and the setbacks, it is limited for the building area. Personally, I have no problem with what they're proposing here. The only issue I have, this is not the application which we're sitting here. It hasn't been advertised properly, whatever, so therefore I have an issue of either approving or disapproving this application right at the moment.
And Mr. Chairman, to respond to Mr. Avent's comments, that is exactly correct. And certainly the applicant is absolutely welcome to submit a new application and is also certainly welcome to withdraw the current application.
And I will say that I did speak with the applicant this afternoon, and I encourage the applicant that if this were to come up, that we could then table this if there was some discussions, and then that way she wouldn't have to go back and submitting a new application by deadlines. And I think there was a deadline possibly today. And if this application is tabled, then it is still in the hopper for.
Yes.
And if
Can
that
we do that legally? I mean, advertising.
It will have to be re-advertised.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what I would add to that, Mr. Chairman, is make certain that if that is the desire of this board, to table it to the next Board of Adjustments meeting. Am I saying that correctly for you? Because
to the January.
Yes, table it to the next meeting, so that way we're not locked into a certain number of days, whatever meeting that day occurs, whatever day that meeting occurs.
Does this have to be withdrawn?
Well, as the chairman was saying, is that if the board wishes to table it, then we do just that. We table the topic, and then we as staff, we can work with the applicant on resubmitting a new application for you to consider at the January meeting.
Okay.
And are there any other? I'm sorry. I have one more statement. Are there any other questions or comments by the board? I think, just again, personally, like Mr. Avent said, Buford, for what it's worth, my opinion, take it for what it's worth, is all these houses are facing this road.
Which way?
They're facing
the
access, the flag lot.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, there may be some opportunities there to adjust this setback to be in coordinating with the rest of them. So just for what that's worth,
Absolutely.
and that may be a way to work through some situations. Okay, just my perspective.
Well, Mr. Chairman, that's the benefit of having this type of proceeding with a board.
Okay.
Is we are able to table a topic for further research.
Okay. All right. Yes, ma'am. Would you like to say one more thing? All right. Go ahead.
I just would like to, because I've never had this happen before, so I'm very new at this. I mean, I wanted to, and I submitted the survey that you're looking at, and Buford looked at me and said, "Well, I can't approve this." So I said, "Okay, I'll call the surveyor." They changed the lines the way he wanted them, but the people that are buying the lot had already approved the first survey. I mean, they already know what they're going to build. And so that's why I just wish, I mean, what would have happened if I had put the first survey that I had done, the one you're looking at, and had him disapprove it? I mean, I don't understand how it works.
Well, can I address
Please
it?
go right ahead.
I'll sympathize with what you're saying, But then again, we only can go with the application which is before us
I
right
understand.
now. And then again, your client signed the application. So it's not up to
I
us.
know.
We got to go by the procedures what's given to us. So what they need to do is either accepting the table or
Withdraw.
Well, if I had-
withdraw it or let us
Vote on it.
vote on it. And
Well, if I had
I-
subjected the first survey, even though he said he couldn't approve it, would that have made any difference?
we can't answer that right now. All I can tell you is that we are looking at the application.
Sure.
You are coming back and requesting something different. So what we need to do is, if we vote on it, I don't think you'll like the outcome. Let me put it that way.
All right.
So if y'all table it, we'll just be here a month from now.
Yes, sir.
And in the meantime, she'll get the right application in.
And she can work through with staff and work through comments, and maybe staff will help come up with a unique solution to the irregular shaped piece of property that is clearly present.
That's exactly right, Mr. Chairman. We will prepare a brand new staff recommendation.
Okay.
Brand new staff recommendation that'll be heard at this meeting, the same meeting in January.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. With that, I will entertain any motion.
I'll make a motion that we table this until our January meeting,
I have a motion to table it till the January meeting. Do I have a second?
January 18th.
I'll second.
All right. I have a motion on the second. Motion and a second to table this case until the January meeting.
Mr. Snyder?
Aye.
Ms. Stankowski? Aye. Mr. Avent?
Aye.
Mr. Strunk?
Aye.
Ms. Slagle?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimous.
See you all in January.
And that meeting will be, it would be on the 15th, but it'll actually be moved to the 18th, which is a Thursday.
You want to submit a new application?
No, we'll just work with staff.
We'll revise and edit your current application to reflect your current.
I know.
And I've been quiet.
You have. I like this. We're going to play this on our Wednesday morning meeting. All right. Case number 1721.
Mr. Chairman, we have before you a side setback variance. And if you'll forgive me for going on ad nauseum, I want to make certain we have the background here. This is purely a zoning matter, but it's for an in-progress site plan review, as well as an in-progress PUD amendment. So the applicant is developing a property in the Greeno Professional Village, which of course lies between Edwards and Gayfer along Greeno Road. That is an existing PUD that was approved in 2002. This would be the southernmost lot that is being developed for a community bank location. The side setback variance request specifically, and I'll tell you what page to turn to in your packet in just a moment. If you'll look on page 5 in your packet, and I'm going to have to verbalize a lot. We don't have the benefit of having a screen, so I'll have to verbalize it quite a bit. But if you'll notice, that excerpt, the excerpt drawing that you're looking at, is showing the two building columns that support the drive-through canopy that will be on the building. This will be on the north side of the building, perpendicular to Greeno Road. And because of the setbacks that were adopted in this PUD, they mirror some of our other zoning requirements. In this particular area, you will have a 15-foot driveway side setback to fit the building onto the lot. Basically, the face of the columns that hold up that end of the driveway canopy are right on the side setback line. So the issue is that their desire is for the canopy projection to be 7 feet 4 3/8 of an inch.
It's cantilevered over.
Yes, sir. That end, the north projection will cantilever northward from the columns that support it. The way the zoning ordinance reads is that projection cannot be more than 2 feet, cannot be more than 24 inches. And so they asked for a variance request to allow that projection to be 7 feet 4 3/8 inches in lieu of the required 2 feet. The issue here, of course, is that because the columns are right on the setback line is why they're limited by the zoning ordinance to the 2 feet. So therefore, our recommendation is for denial based upon compliance with the zoning ordinance. If the columns were a bit farther back from the setback line, they could have a farther projection, but in case they're right on the setback line. And so therefore, we've recommended denial for that. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, what I have with us tonight is when we turn it over to the applicant, I actually have the architect of record, Mr. Neil Poland, who's the architect of record for the project representing the owner. But I'll be happy to answer your questions before we turn it over to the applicant.
I have one
Yes, sir.
question, Buford. Has this already gone through site plan?
Mr. Chairman, answering Mr. Avent's question, we have current site plan approval and PUD amendment approval by the Planning Commission, and it is awaiting placement on a future City Council agenda. So what this allows is in the interim between meetings, they can get this standalone zoning issue resolved. So that way, after the City Council, if the City Council chooses to give them approval, they can immediately proceed with preparing their drawings for their building permit.
What was the Planning Commission's recommendation to the City Council?
It was approval. It was approval on both the site plan as well as there is a PUD amendment.
Right.
And no need for us to get into the weeds on that, but it basically rectifies the site to reflect what they're going to build, and we had approval by the Planning Commission on both of those.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you.
One more thing, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I'm just trying to get the procedures. No matter what we say, it still goes to the City Council.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. This is, and I'm very happy to answer that question. This is a standalone issue. We could address it now. We could address it after the City Council has approved or disapproved. This is a standalone, isolated, strictly a zoning ordinance matter that we could pretty much handle any time. We encourage the applicant to go ahead and proceed with this now, so that way, following City Council review of their project, should they receive approval there, this strictly zoning matter, architectural item on this building, they can proceed with preparing their drawings. But this is an isolated zoning matter that will not affect and is not germane to the recommendations of approval or denial related to their PUD amendment or their site plan approval.
But staff is recommending denial.
We are recommending denial because of we're recommending denial in this case because of the non-compliance with the zoning ordinance.
I got to ask this question again. And no matter if we vote in favor of the applicant, how does the PUD is therefore amended?
No, sir. This won't affect the PUD. Because all of the allowable uses that are built into the PUD are satisfied by this project.
But then again, the PUD document only allows 2-foot overhang or cantilevered over the setback, right?
Mr. Chairman, note the zoning ordinance, the PUD doesn't address it. So it would not.
Yes, sir.
But then again, doesn't the PUD supersede the zoning? The PUD is the zoning.
Well, the PUD is the zoning, and the way we interpret that, and Ms. Boyette, please jump in here and correct me, we're getting into the weeds a bit.
Well, it's important to me.
No, absolutely. That's a fantastic question. We have to go back to whatever the underlying zoning would be if the PUD doesn't address it.
Correct. It doesn't specifically address, so it would go back to the
yes, sir.
That makes
so
sense.
Whenever exactly, so you're exactly right. So to follow the trail very briefly, the 15-foot side setback, driveway side setback, is a function of the PUD. The projection is a function of the zoning ordinance because we're going to go by the underlying zoning requirements since it was not addressed in the PUD.
The reason I'm asking this, I wrote to PUD, so.
Yes, sir.
I got to follow.
So I have a question. I understand what will happen if it's approved. What is the procedure then through the planning and zoning and the commission if it's denied?
And Mr. Chairman, what will happen there is that when the applicant, when they submit their building plans will have to reflect the 2-foot 0-inch projection.
2 foot over the setback.
Over the setback line, yes, sir.
And currently, the way it's proposed, it is proposed to go to the property line.
Well, it would project 7 feet 4 3/8 inches from the face of the columns that hold up, the canopy.
Still be on the property.
And those columns, the face of those columns is right on the setback line.
Where's the canopy?
Right there.
Is this already
Goes back a
started
curb?
building?
No, sir.
Or so we're still in the drawing stage?
Yes, sir.
I'm trying to figure out where the canopy's going.
Look, right here.
Oh, I see it. There's the canopy line right there.
They ought to just go back and start
Overhang.
See
7
right
foot
here.
4. No, there's the overhang right there.
Yes, sir. So, Mr. Chairman, if you are looking at that detail, you'll notice a dashed line. If you look at the
Yeah, but
column
it's
on the left,
7.6 from the property line.
So the
Y'all see
the
this
canopy.
one?
Yeah, if you'll turn, that's what I was saying. If you'll turn to the next page.
Hey,
Problem is I can't-
Top of
still
page
can't
5.
see that
Yeah,
there.
keep going.
What is it?
Come on, magnifying glass.
there we go.
What is that distance?
7 feet 4 3/8 inches.
Okay.
And the ordinance is only allowing for 2 feet.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So you see the dash line?
Yes.
It goes. So essentially, they're requesting a 5 foot 4-inch
Variance.
variance.
What's on the other north side of that?
Jade.
Jade office.
The Jade complex is immediately north.
And that's it. Trade us a pie. No.
Okay. Thank you, Beaver.
Thank you.
All right. Applicant, would you like to speak?
Thank you. If I may, I'd
State your name and-
Sure. Neil Poland with Dell Partners Architects. I'm the project architect for Community Bank on this project. Mr. King has been very helpful to me in kind of working through this process. I do think it's important to provide a little bit of background information on why the north column for the drive-through is set on the setback line. It's not like we didn't just place it there out of preference. The PUD, there's an access road that runs along the east and the south side. There originally was provided an easement, an ingress and egress easement for that road to be far to the east and to the south. Along with many other things in this PUD, it was not built according to what the PUD provided for. And so we feel like the owner, in purchasing the property, was basically given a piece of property that had, in terms of the infrastructure and the access road, wasn't built the way it was originally intended to. So what that resulted in is a very limited, narrow strip of land in which you can actually construct the bank. And we felt like the most appropriate side of the for the drive-through to be on is the north side. It's the most non-publicly visible side. But because of the way that road kind of curves east and then north, and then the distance from that curve to the northern property line, it's a relatively shallow distance. And so in order for us to get the 3 drive-through lanes that the bank was requesting, we ended up having to have that northernmost column really kind of on the setback line. And so I just think it's important to provide that information, because this isn't just a poor design decision or anything like that. This is really almost a necessity because of how the site and the adjacent properties were developed. The other thing that I would add is that all we're trying to do is allow customers to be protected from rain when they're going through the drive-through. There's no other reason other than that. We are requesting I'll be happy to round up or down, but we're requesting essentially a 7'6" overhang, which would be about a 5 foot plus addition than what is allowed. But any relaxation in the 2 foot would be beneficial. We would be more than happy to accept that. A couple of other things I would like to add. The Jade building to the north, it's approximately 40 feet away. There's a hedge line that runs along the property line that separates the two driveways, so we don't feel like this in any way would be negatively affecting the property to the north. And I think that's about it. We feel like this is a reasonable request, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. We just feel like we're trying to respond to the available site that we had to build on, and there really wasn't a better location to put the drive-through. One other thing I would add is what the bank wants to do is have that outer lane as a full-service transaction lane, and they've moved the ATM to the inside of the building. That's something banks are doing these days. It's a much more safe and secure way to maintain the ATMs. If this is denied, the bank would have to consider moving the ATM back out to the outside and opening that inner lane for traffic. And it's certainly doable, but not preferred by the bank. So we feel like this is a responsible approach, and originally included this request as part of our PUD amendment, and then we were advised by Mr. King to basically separate it out as a Board of Adjustments request. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Well, you mentioned that you were going to, that any relief that they gave.
Yes, sir.
Okay. It's 2 foot right now. What's the next minimum that you'd be willing to take, assuming that they don't want to do 7 foot?
6'11"? How was that? I'm kidding. No,
7'5".
The point is, anything more than 2 feet is beneficial, and I didn't want if someone felt like 7'6", or 7'4" 3/8", as it's currently drawn. If someone felt like that was extreme, I didn't want that to prevent us from getting any kind of relief. I do stand by, though, I don't feel like what is currently drawn is in any way a hindrance or an obstruction to the property to the north.
Well, let me ask you this. The whole purpose of this canopy
Yes, sir.
projection is to keep water off of the customers.
Yes, sir.
Okay, when you pull up to a bank, you roll down your window, etc. And, when you get to the actual cashier or whatever they call that part where you talk to them, the communication bank you'll have. How many feet does it take? In other words, how far in is the car that's actually doing business and the guy behind it? Would 4 foot cover his window?
It would certainly help. Part of that's a function of, is it wind-driven rain versus is it just a rainy day? I think if you get 4 feet, you're starting to get to something reasonable. I think, if we're forced to go with 2 feet, you might as well not have an overhang at all. And so
Right.
I do feel like...
Yeah, because then you're just falling on the hood of the car.
2 feet would almost be worse because, like you're saying, you would have rain falling directly on someone whose arm is out the window.
Right.
So, not trying to dodge your question, but I think if you do get to 4 or 5 feet, that does start to actually do some good. But obviously, whether it's 4 feet, 6 feet, or even 8 feet, we don't feel like it's going to make much of a difference to the property owner to the north. You're still, like I said, I think over 40 feet from the nearest building. And just on the north side of the property line, it's the driveway for the building to the north. So it's not as if there's a building that's really kind of nearby this particular drive-through.
Well, my only reason for asking that is if it's granted a 7 foot extension.
Yes, sir.
In variance. Then what about the next bank that goes up? Does he get 7 foot too?
That's why I felt like it was important to provide some background information on this particular piece of property and the fact that we were forced to design on a piece of property that wasn't really developed the way it was intended in terms of the infrastructure and the access road. And that's something Mr. King and I had pretty lengthy discussions about is, I didn't want to go through this process if we were just requesting something without any kind of justification for it. But we felt like and Mr. King, I don't want to speak for Mr. King, but I mean, he has voiced that outside of the way the ordinance is written, this is a very reasonable request. And he's helped shepherd us through the PUD amendment process and has had to verbalize I won't go into them, but all the different ways in which the original design of the PUD has not been adhered to. But it has resulted in a very limited buildable area for this site. But I do think this is a unique situation. This is not just, we just decided to put the overhang and the drive-through here without any kind of thought behind it, and now we're going and asking for a variance. This has kind of been, we felt like our best approach from the very beginning.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
This may be naive comment, but have you considered redesigning the space in the bank to accommodate? I mean, you've got plenty of rooms. If you just make each room a little bit smaller on each end, you've made up the distance that you're looking for.
We've tried that. We're also working with the requirements of the bank and the spaces that they require for their office sizes. I mean, this is a growing bank, and they have offices all over, and they have a pretty standard size that they like their spaces to be.
You don't have a standard lot you're dealing with, so you have to compromise a little bit on the design of the building?
Sure, I understand that. But again, we feel like this is a reasonable request because this isn't impeding on an adjacent property in any way. There's an existing hedge that separates our outermost drive-through lane with the one to the north. Obviously you don't have the benefit of seeing our design process up until this point.
Right.
But we were pretty exhaustive in trying to come up with a floor plan that fit. And in fact, this floor plan is narrower than some of the recent branches that they've done for that very reason. So, the floor plan that you see has been iterated to smaller office sizes than what they have had in the past, just to get something that might be feasible on this piece of property.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, the issue I have with this is that in order for someone to purchase this and spend the amount of money hiring architects, engineers, surveyors, and all that, is that there's two documents out there. Is the zoning and you have the PUD. And it gets kind of confusing when you get into a situation like this. The PUD, unfortunately, didn't cover it as well. That's one of the downfalls of PUDs is everything's outlined in a narrative, and it's no way you can get all the rules in a narrative where like it would be in the zoning ordinance. That's the only place I really struggle is which one should we go by, If the PUD falls silent and it's a true zone, then there's no requirement. That's, if it falls silent. I don't know how you can, I know it's an underlining zoning, but I don't know how I've never seen the underlining zoning overrule a PUD, and I'm not saying it shouldn't, I've never seen that. So if something falls silent in a PUD, it's not a rule. That's the reason for a PUD. You have certain guidelines that, flexibilities and such. And with that, that's the only issue I have.
Well, is this going to affect if they extend this at all? Is it going to affect the traffic pattern at all?
If they extend what?
Say we give you the 7 foot, just for the sake of discussion.
Sure.
Okay. Is that going to extend is that going to affect the traffic pattern at all?
Setback line by 2 feet.
You're on a busy
That's all they're
road,
asking
right,
for?
Greeno?
You're not coming in off of the
thought they were
highway.
7
You're
feet.
coming in off of turning in off of Reno, and then you have to
Requesting
travel
for
up
the 2-foot
probably
overhang requirement to relax and
you
allow
know, a
overhang
couple hundred
as
feet
shown.
before you actually get to. And to your point, Mr. Schneider, that's part of the reason we located the drive-through where we did, because we felt like it was in the least trafficked area.
What's this say?
Existing chain link fence. Property line.
Did you say that there hasn't, the north owners, that they don't oppose this?
We have not heard any obstruction or any feedback from that. I will say, and I certainly don't want to speak for another property owner, when we went through the PUD amendment hearing a few weeks ago, a lady representing an adjacent that adjacent property was there just to hear what we were doing, and afterwards she was excited and voiced support for it. But again, I don't want to speak for her, and she didn't mention this as any particular issue.
The other question I have for you, let's assume that you build this. Where's the drainage? We're so close to the property line, you don't have roof run off. Does it go on?
The drive. So we have an internal drainage system on the primary roof, but the drive-through we have downspouts and gutters.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
That's what I want to
Yes,
hear. Because
there
when
would be
someone's
any-
right on the property line, you
Yes,
don't
sir.
want to spill a bunch of water over on
Yes,
them.
sir. No, sir. We'll have gutters and downspouts on the drive-through.
Okay.
That ties into underground drainage.
All right. Do you have anything else this time?
Happy to answer any questions.
All right. I'd like to open the public hearing. Anybody to speak? Nope. Okay. We want to close the public hearing. Are there any board questions or comments for the applicant or staff? Hearing none. I will then entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the application as shown and requested.
All right.
Second that.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Discussion on the motion. I have one question for staff on this topic. If we grant this variance, are we only granting the variance for the extension of that canopy and no expansion to the building footprint?
Yeah, that is correct, sir. That is strictly related to the expansion, this is strictly related to the projection of the canopy.
For the projection of the canopy.
Projection of the canopy, and therefore, because it is a function of the side setback.
Okay. I just would like that mentioned in the minutes that is for the projection of the canopy.
Yes, sir. So
only.
we had to word it as a side setback variance because, as you can tell, it is a function. Schematically, it's a function. Schematically, the projection of the canopy is a function of the side setback variance.
Okay. All right. There's been a motion, a second on the floor for approval of the request.
Roll call.
Roll.
Mr. Schneider?
Aye, yes.
Ms. Stankowski? Aye. Mr. Raymond?
Aye.
Mr. Strong?
Nay.
Ms. Slagle?
Nay.
Motion failed.
Did the motion carry?
No,
No.
Bill.
All right. Old business.
I think we're done now, aren't we?
Is there any old business?
Staff has no other.
Do we have any cases for next month?
Yes, we have one that we tabled tonight. And we did have 2 cases submitted. Our meeting will be held on a Thursday next month due to the Martin Luther King holiday. So that will be on January 18th.
All right. Motion for adjournment.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All in favor? Aye.
It is adjourned.